Hello again, everybody, and welcome to a brand new, not previously recorded episode of the Good Friends, Better Enemies podcast. I am Tyrone, and as always, I'm joined by Jay. Jay, I hope you're doing well. Last week, our lives kind of got in the way a little bit, but we're back, ain't we, bud?
We sure are. Now, I just want to preface the point that we're not live right now, like broadcasting live. So, in essence, this episode too will be pre-recorded, but recorded closer to the date that we're releasing it. You understand what I'm saying there?
Yes. It was recorded in 2021, at least we can say that.
Yes, that's very fair. Just full disclosure, folks, that when you're in the podcast world, sometimes it makes sense to have a couple of bonus episodes in the can, so to speak, so that in case anything like last week ever happens, that we have some content to drop for you. And that's in fact what happened last week. Both of us couldn't get our schedules synced, and with all these COVID restrictions and different things going on, moving parts in both of our worlds, unfortunately, it just wasn't going to work last week. But we hope that you enjoyed our offering of the Saturday night's main event from February 3rd, 1989, the night that the Mega Powers exploded. I think it was a really fun episode, and I actually really enjoyed going back and listening to it. Our commentary on some of those matches was actually quite entertaining. I had a couple of laugh out loud moments. Did you get a chance to skim through or no?
No, I'm not even going to lie, I didn't.
That's fair. Well, we did it once, so why listen to it again? So I understand that completely from your perspective. Onwards and upwards with us. And this week, we are actually covering the WWE RoadBlock Network special from the Rico Coliseum on March 12th, 2016 in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Now, just full disclosure here, folks, that both Tyrone and I were in attendance at this event and actually in attendance together. So we were buckling up for a pretty fun night of wrestling action. I believe that Tyrone and I were taking turns buying rounds of Smirnoff Ice. For what reason, I have no idea. But I do recall us having a gas. So we are going to cover that today and also talk about our experiences in and around the event. But before we do, I believe, Tyrone, that you had something you wanted to discuss. You wanted to bring up a recent purchase that you made vis-a-vis pay-per-view.
Well, that's the fun thing about not being able to do this show for a couple of weeks is we actually have some quite a few things to talk about this week, and we're going to start it all off with AEW Revolution, which was my very first AEW not only pay-per-view but show that I have watched. And I got to say, if that's what the AEW product is, I don't need to watch anymore. I was completely turned off by it. Not only that terrible main event ending, but just the card from beginning to end. I think the thing I hated most wasn't even the main event. It was the Sting, Darby Allin, Brian Cage kind of match. I don't want to call it a match because it wasn't, but I guess that's the best thing that you can do with Sting at 61 years old these days. I wasn't a big fan. There were some pluses, there were some positives. I thought the Young Bucks looked great in their showing. I didn't necessarily hate I think it was called the Casino Battle Royale with all the different tag teams. I thought it was weird that if one member of the team went out, they both weren't eliminated, but I get that they're trying to stay away from WWE rules, which is what they tend to do. But overall, I give this show a giant thumbs down. How about you, Jay? I know you watched it too.
Yeah, I watched it as well. I actually watched it with my girlfriend, and she hadn't really seen any AEW. She's not seen a lot of wrestling, period. And most of what I've shown her has been WWE stuff, bigger matches that she's seen. And so she knows some of the bigger names, and she knows, obviously, my fandom of The Undertaker and all that kind of thing. And she actually, she has observed a couple of things that I really enjoyed, because even though she's not a wrestling fan, she pointed out things that us as marks noticed right away. Like, for example, when we were watching the ladder match, the brass ring ladder match, she noticed that there were times in the match that it wasn't realistic to her, because she could tell that people were stalling for time when climbing the ladder and things of that nature. It wasn't done in a dramatic fashion where the person was really trying to grab that brass ring and just exhausted, and it was their last ditch effort to grab the ring. It was more along the lines of, hey, I'm standing here kind of like pretending to not look around to see where my next spot's coming from. Okay, there it is. Now I'm going to jump. So she noticed stuff like that, which I thought was quite interesting from somebody who's really a non-fan and seen very little of the product, to notice little things like that. And sort of similar, I mean, the women's match as well. I mean, yeah, they worked really hard. I thought that the women's match went too long. I thought that there were too many false finishes. I think there's too many false finishes in AEW, period. It's actually an industry-wide issue right now. And as well, I mean, your point about that casino battle royal, I just thought it was like Gone with the Wind. Like, it was going on for so long. And it was boring, frankly, to me. I thought that they did such an incredible job building this pay-per-view and hyping it. There was so much hype going into it. And I think that's partly part of the reason why you bought the pay-per-view, Tyrone. I don't want to speak for you. We haven't really discussed much off air about this, but I think that just they did such a phenomenal job building up this main event, this barbed wire explosion match. And then, of course, who's the big signee? Impossible standards to live up to. I think, had you maybe not pre-announced that you were signing somebody big and just had Christian show up on the pay-per-view in some form or fashion, would have been much more impactful than putting it out there that somebody big is going to be signed, because then you build the expectations to a level that you can't possibly live up to. People are expecting it to be Lesnar, John Cena, CM Punk, and then, no offense to Christian, but anybody other than somebody like that's going to be a letdown. The internet wrestling community got a field day with this fantasy booking of who's going to show up at the pay-per-view. So I don't know. I'm with you. I don't think it's indicative of the AEW product as a whole. I think that they do some really good stuff, but I definitely was very disappointed with this pay-per-view, and sad to say that I can't see myself ordering another one for a while. I'm going to be sitting out for a while.
Well, and that's just it. Like, I contemplated, like, when I was ordering that one, I'm like, oh, maybe I'll order the next Impact pay-per-view too and see what they're doing. The NWA one that's coming up, maybe I'll do that. But now I'm just kind of turned off, because I know that Impact and AEW have such a working relationship that I'm worried, am I just going to be throwing another $50 down the drain? It's just going to be the same shit, different pile. I don't want to do it. But speaking of Christian, I called that one, like most people did. I was not surprised in the slightest. I think that from a business perspective, it's a smart choice, considering he came back at the Rumble. There were all these rumblings that he was signed with the company. I thought he was signed with the company, to be perfectly honest with you, and that we were going to see an ENC reunion, which clearly we're not now. But like you said, everybody was expecting such a big name that Christian Cage was almost a letdown.
Like anticlimactic almost.
I think I was more excited and popped harder to see Ethan Page as the mystery man in the ladder match than for Christian Cage to come out as the big signee.
Yeah, that's the thing. And again, like, I don't think it's any knock on Christian. I know that you and I kind of see Christian differently. Like, I'm a big fan of his, and you think he's okay, but he's not your favorite. I'm very surprised, frankly, that the WWE let him go. They didn't have plans for him, knowing that he was cleared and then having Edge cleared at the same time. To me, it kind of writes itself. Okay, sure, you have Edge have this big singles moment here at WrestleMania. Maybe he wins the title, maybe he doesn't. I don't know where they're going with it. But to have that in your pocket down the road as a potential main event for a SummerSlam, say, coming up with the reunion of Edge and Christian, to me, I don't know, it just writes itself. I don't know why you would let that opportunity go. Maybe they just didn't have anything for Christian. I don't know. I think they're at a point right now and with their booking in the WWE that they need to hold on to as many established stars as they have. Now, granted, Christian is sort of at a legend status now. He's not a full-time performer, obviously, but he can clearly still go. He's in great shape. So I don't see why you wouldn't have held on to somebody who is established, has a legacy with the company, that could help elevate younger talent and get them over to a higher degree. So I'm very confused as to why they would have let him go in the first place. And one other point before I let you retort here is when we speak about the Sting match, I actually quite enjoyed the presentation of that Sting match. The only thing I didn't understand was why there was a ring. Like, get rid of the ring, and I thought the match was really good. It wasn't really a match; it was just like a brawl, like a fight scene of an action movie. But when you put a ring randomly in a warehouse, you completely take me out of, like, my suspension of disbelief is completely unsuspended. Like, I can't buy into that. And even like going back to my girlfriend, she said the same thing. She's like, this is kind of neat, but why is there a ring there? And I couldn't answer it for her.
It's like what we spoke about a couple of weeks ago on the WCW episode, that in their hardcore division, all of a sudden they're at a fair and there's tables set up for them to go through and everything like that. It was completely ridiculous. But
Yeah.
NXT did something similar to that about a year ago with Ciampa and Gargano. It was supposed to be this unsanctioned match that was going to be in the middle of nowhere, in a warehouse, only a referee there to count a three. And I'm like, this is stupid. Just let them fight. You don't need them in a ring. We know what they can do in a ring. Just let them fight. It was, I thought that they went for the theatrical side, and I get that. I just wasn't a fan personally, and I enjoy a lot of theatrical matches. This one just was not for me. Now, just one last thing I want to touch on about AEW before we move on, and that is I didn't watch Dynamite afterwards, but from what I've seen, there is a new faction, and that new faction definitely intrigues me. With FTR, MJF, Sean Spears, and Tully Blanchard, that's the four horsemen right there, and I am all about that one.
Yeah, I'm a little intrigued myself. I don't know exactly where they're going with that. I can't imagine they have the rights to the Horseman name. I mean, obviously the four horsemen of the apocalypse, that's a big biblical name. So I don't think that WWE owns the rights to four horsemen, obviously. But in terms of being branded and merchandised and monetized as a wrestling faction, I don't know that they would be able to do that in AEW. I don't know where the intellectual property lies with that, but it certainly is interesting. And I think it's at a point now that you could kind of put that faction together and say it without saying it. I mean, all of the fans of AEW are going to know what it's supposed to be. It's kind of the same thing as calling Cody Rhodes Cody. You know, Cody Rhodes got the rights to the Rhodes name again, so he can use it. But for the longest time, he was just Cody. So everybody knew who he was. So I think that in that sense, you can get around it. But definitely, I am intrigued to see where they go. And those are four really solid choices. I mean, the FTR goes without saying. And then, of course, I love MJF in there as kind of like the mouthpiece. He'd be almost the flair of the group in a sense, I guess. Sean Spears, yeah, I like it. Gonna have to see what the chemistry's like, but I'm intrigued for sure.
Yeah, if there was one that I could kind of take or leave, it would be Sean Spears, and that's nothing against him. It's just I haven't seen a lot of his work lately. I know that Tully was managing him, so it makes sense to put him in the group. But yeah, that's really all I got to say about that. I think I'm done with AEW unless you have anything else to say.
Not really, no. I mean, just to button it up for me, I do enjoy AEW quite a bit. I've mentioned that a few times on this podcast, and I don't want to say that I'm giving up on the product whatsoever. I think that they have a lot of gas in the tank, and I think that it was just one of those events that good for them that they were able to hype it up to the level that they did. I mean, I was on the fence up until about half an hour before the event took place, whether or not I was going to order it. And then I just thought to myself, like, there's so much good stuff on this card, and they've built it up in such a way that I really feel like I'm missing out if I don't order it. And I now in hindsight, I wish I hadn't, but I hope that that's not the case going forward. And I'll obviously tune in for the next little while, leading up to the next pay-per-view and see where their angles are at. But yeah, it was just such an unfortunate misstep for them. I think that this pay-per-view, had it gone as expected, would have really given them a shot in the arm, you know, with momentum and things of that nature. So it's too bad, but I'm sure they'll be able to bounce back and recover.
I mean, they've got all the momentum behind them already. Everybody loves AEW and shits on WWE, so no matter what they do, everyone's still gonna love it.
Okay, fair enough.
Well, we're going to segue into our next little segment here, which normally would be This Week in Wrestling History, but for the next couple of weeks at least, Jay and I have decided to switch that up. We're going to do a little bit of WrestleMania trivia and see if we can stump each other right now, right, Jay?
That's right. So I believe the way we've formatted this is that whomever is booking, or rather rebooking that week, will be answering the trivia questions. So if that holds water, then that means that I'll be the one that's answering the questions this week, and then vice versa next week. Do I have that right?
You do, and I just want to preference everybody that we did not discuss the questions ahead of time. This is legit. This is a shoot. I'm trying to stump Jay. I'll give him a couple of softballs, but I got 3 questions for him, and I genuinely think he probably will get all of them because I know him, but you never know. So let me know when you're ready for the first one there, bud.
Are any of the answers Ahmed Johnson?
No Ahmed Johnson anywhere in this one.
Damn it. Okay. Okay, I'll take the first one, please.
All right, we're going to go to WrestleMania 29 for this one.
Oh,
And the opening contest was a 6-man tag match. Just tell me who was in it.
I believe it was Randy Orton, Big Show, and Sheamus versus The Shield, baby.
You're 1 for 1 so far there, bud.
All right, there we go.
You sounded a little unsure on that one.
I was a little unsure. We've talked about this so many times, Tyrone, and I think you and I are both in the same boat that once you get past like 2011 for me, things start to really like just all blend into one color, like one shit, like everything just sort of blend. It's like one of those old, remember those old paintings that you used to look at in the 90s where you'd stare at it and then suddenly like a picture would reveal itself?
The magic eye.
Yeah, kind of like that. Like I feel like after like 2011, everything just kind of looks exactly the same to me in terms of like it's all
one giant sailboat. That's all you can see.
Exactly. Like I can't discern from one month to the next. Yeah, I would have no idea who main evented other than a Mania or a Rumble or something.
All right, well, let's give you a bit more of a curve or a softball here. We're going to go to everybody's favorite WrestleMania 17. The gimmick battle royale was won by the Iron Sheik.
Mm-hmm.
Who did he throw out last to win it?
Sergeant Slaughter.
No, I thought so too, but I had to rewatch and look it up. It was Hillbilly Jim.
Oh, man.
Slaughter just came back in and put him in the Cobra Clutch. Or not the Cobra Clutch. Cobra Clutch? Yeah. Yes, Cobra Clutch, not Camel Clutch.
Yeah, Cobra Clutch. That's right. Yeah, well, I don't think that Sheik was in any position to take bumps at that point anyway, so that's probably why they had that.
That's legitimately why he won the damn match. He couldn't get over the top rope.
Yeah. Well, I guess what's this year's WrestleMania? Next year, I guess if we're going by canon, next year's WrestleMania will be when Iron Sheik actually gets to the ring, according to the commentary.
Wasn't it this year? Wasn't it 37?
No, he said by the time the Iron Sheik gets to the ring, it'll be WrestleMania 38. So I guess he'll be making his way to the steps by this time next year.
How incredible would it be if they actually had him do a cameo for that reason?
It would be amazing. I don't see it happening, but if I was writing in the WWE, damn it, I'd do it.
All right, well, you're 1 for 2, so let's see if you can get on the winning side with this final question.
Okay.
And we're going to go back to 1987, WrestleMania 3. Yeah. The very first 6-man tag match at a WrestleMania happened there, and I need to know who was involved.
Well, it was the Hart Foundation and Dangerous Danny Davis versus the British Bulldogs. Was it Coco Beware? No.
So yes, that was a 6-man tag match on the card, but that is not the very first 6-man tag match on the card. Oh,
was it the one with Bundy? I don't know.
I need to know who was in it.
Oh. I shoot. I don't remember. Haiti Kid, Little Beaver, and Lord Littlebrook versus King Kong Bundy and a few other folks. I don't remember. Geez, I'm sorry.
You know what? I'll give you a half point on this one, and we'll call it a 50% win because it was Hillbilly Jim, the Haiti Kid, and Little Beaver taking on King Kong Bundy, Lord Littlebrook, and Little Tokyo.
Okay, yes, I'm sorry. It's been so long since I've watched WrestleMania 3, and there were so many matches on that card. That's good on you, man. Those were really good. I have to
I
tell you.
like that we say that. I like that we say that there are so many matches on that card. There were 12 last year. I think that there was 20.
It feels like there's a ton though on those older WrestleManias, doesn't it? Because like for a while, like in the mid to late '90s, I felt like we only had like maybe 8 matches on a card, and then back some of those
Which
matches
is all you need.
minutes long, but
That's all you need is 10 maximum. I don't care what the event is. I don't ever want more than 10 matches, which obviously this year split between 2 days, we're probably going to get 20 again.
yeah. Well, I appreciate the trivia questions. I'm definitely gonna come up with some stumpers for you. I honestly I like to think of myself as a fairly well educated wrestling fan, but sometimes there's so much wrestling content. Sometimes you just get lost in your own mind, and honestly, I just plumb forgot some of them. So good on you, and I'll see if I don't have a receipt for you next week. But speaking of WrestleMania, the next topic we wanted to quickly discuss. Oh, and you know what? I just thought of this, folks, before we get into the next topic is if you have any trivia questions for us, those of you listening on YouTube exclusively, hit us up on our social and drop us a question. Drop us a couple of trivia questions. See if if we get a chance, then we'll definitely ask them on air, and we'll give you full credit for them as well. So don't hesitate. If you're listening and you have a couple of trivia questions you want to hit us up with, then please, by all means, go right ahead and do so. And we thank you very much in advance. But Tyrone, I believe we were going to quickly discuss what's going on this year with the road to WrestleMania. You and I have very polarizing views.
I thoroughly enjoy it because this looks like the first year. I mean, since part-timers were a thing, that we're not going to get any part-timers on the card, and I am stoked. I don't have to see Triple H. I don't have to see The Undertaker. I don't have to see any of them. I mean, I feel like I'm going to see Shane McMahon, but I guess one out of all of them is about. I'll take Shane over Goldberg. I'll give you that.
Yeah, and see, whereas I kind of feel like if there's one year where they really needed it, it was this year. So there's two schools of thought, right? I guess you can think of it in the way that because it's pandemic times and all that kind of thing, like you can kind of run this experiment where you see what WrestleMania is going to look like without part-timers being involved in some of the higher up matches, some of the more main event matches or upper card matches, and see how it draws and how everything goes and all that kind of thing. Because you're going to have so many people, I would think, going in and seeing the event, being live in attendance, because they've now announced that tickets are going on sale this upcoming Friday. And of course, they're hoping for about 45,000 people in the stadium. Don't know. I personally think that this is probably the year that you maybe need a couple of really big established names more than any other year previously. I think that maybe you really need a couple of big time names right now for this particular Mania card. I think in truth, and I'm not trying to be harsh on the product, I think that this is one of the worst built WrestleMania seasons I've seen ever. I really don't think it's been done very well. And I also, I really don't know where they're going with a lot of the matches. We have Fastlane coming up, but I'm not particularly excited for this year's WrestleMania at all. And that's not because of a lack of part-timers. I know that a lot of you listening will think that because of my love of old school wrestlers, The Undertaker and people like that. But I just really feel like this has been very poorly built, and I'm not particularly excited for it.
See, the way I'm looking at it is, especially from a company standpoint, they're going to have fans in the crowd for the first time in over a year.
Yeah.
They can, and I think that they know that they're in a place that they can pretty much put whatever card they want together, charge whatever they want for tickets, and it's going to sell out immediately, and everyone's just going to be happy that they're there. It won't really matter. It'll matter to the people at home more than the people in the crowd what they're watching. People in the crowd will just be happy that they can say that they were at WrestleMania, the first event with fans in over a year. they'll be excited about that. Whereas somebody like, say, you, who is sitting at home watching it, might not be overly excited to watch the New Day take on AJ Styles and Omos for the tag titles. And that's fine, because I'm not going to lie, I think that is a terrible, piss poor way to get AJ Styles on the Mania card. I get it. You're going to give Omos his first match at Mania. You're going to try and build him up. If he does not deliver in this match, it is going to be terrible, and I could see his career just taking a giant dive.
Yeah, that's like the matches that they've announced thus far, I'm not overly interested in. Like, I mean, like, I'm happy Edge is back, and I know, okay, again, going back to part-timers. Edge is kind of a part-timer. He's from my childhood. I get all that. I am excited to see Edge, and I'm excited to see that match with Roman. I think it's going to be a pretty good match. I think it was the logical choice to go to that, other than McIntyre. Say McIntyre had held on to the title, having McIntyre go up against Edge at WrestleMania. I would be a little bit less enthusiastic about that one than I am where they're going with this. But I mean, for example, seeing Lashley versus McIntyre, which looks like that's the way they're going, that match doesn't interest me at all. I mean, that feels to me like a Backlash main event or even a Raw main event. Like, I don't feel like that's a really interesting match to me whatsoever.
I totally agree with you on that. And yeah, they did confirm that is where they're going. That is the title match for Mania. But then the only other match so far confirmed that I actually really am invested in, and I think it'll be great, is Sasha Banks and Bianca Belair. I think that has all of the potential to steal the show, depending on how they work. We haven't really seen them go against each other. We don't know if their styles will clash, but I'm stoked for it. But on the other side of things, you have so many talent who are not doing anything. Like, we don't know what's going to happen with Kevin Owens, Sami Zayn, Seth Rollins. We're probably going to get Braun and Shane. They announced it for Fastlane, but we're probably going to get a rematch for that. Asuka doesn't have a match yet. SmackDown tag titles aren't on the line yet. Riddle doesn't have a match for his US title. Like, I don't even know. Oh, Big E doesn't have an Intercontinental title match yet. Like, when this episode airs, we will be 19 days away from day one of WrestleMania, and we don't have a fucking card yet.
Yeah, and I mean, the other thing that I think of as well is, if you look at like this Randy Orton Bray Wyatt feud, for example, like, yes, it's fresh in the sense that we have the Fiend character now going up against Orton, but we've just seen this at a few WrestleManias previous. We just saw this match, the one that god awful match where we had those projected bugs and slugs and maggots in the ring. Like, I just
don't forget the snake that looked like a giant sperm.
Yeah, I just what I almost feel like, and I hate to say this because I have so much respect for all the performers in wrestling. Period. Anybody who performs at a high level is working at this company or AEW or Impact or NWA, wherever they might be performing. I have so much respect for anybody who performs for the audience in the way that they do. But I almost feel as though this might be the WrestleMania where they finally realize that they don't have a roster that is nearly over enough to carry this company. And I fear for it, because this is the reason they keep going back to legends. They keep going back to Taker, going back to Triple H, going back to Goldberg, going back to all these guys that they're bringing in. And I just
and
hits the fan.
I get where you're coming from, but at the same time, do you think that we may be in that position where we don't have a roster that can carry on something like this because they keep going back to all the old timers, because they keep dipping their toes with the John Cenas, with the Undertakers, with the Triple H's, and they haven't given these younger guys the chance? And now all these guys that were the younger guys are all in their mid to late 30s or even early 40s, and they're like, oh God, we don't have anybody. You look at NXT, to me, there are a few people in NXT that I think could totally main event WrestleMania, but I don't know, A, if they want to leave NXT, or B, if the company sees them in that way, shape, or form, they're in a terrible state where they need to start bringing in a lot of young talent, because all of these guys are one injury away from their career being over. And I know you could say that about somebody in their 20s as well, but you look at an AJ Styles who's in his 40s, you look at a Jeff Hardy, you look at all of those guys who they are high flyers, they take risks. All it takes is one miscalculation and they're done. Even a Daniel Bryan, like, he's saying this might be his last Mania. He doesn't know how much longer he's got left. That's a huge spot. You get rid of him, you definitely need somebody to pull up those shoes. And I'm sorry, but it's not going to be Otis. We've already learned that.
Yeah, no, I understand your point. I disagree with it completely in the sense that, yes, they do go back to legends from time to time. They don't have legends regularly wrestling 52 weeks a year, and they don't bring back, say, Goldberg, for example. He comes back twice a year. So he was at WrestleMania last year, and he came back at the Rumble. Same thing with Taker. He might wrestle once a year. Triple H once a year. So I don't think that you can put the lack of current day talent being over. You can't put that on part-time talent. You can't make that distinction. I don't think you can't blame the current day rosters not being over to a higher level on Undertaker or Triple H or Goldberg. I think it's just let me finish 1 sec. I just want to I think there's a couple of issues here. I think one of the biggest ones is that the WWE product as a whole is so overexposed. If you're a hardcore WWE fan or part of the universe, how much programming do you need to watch a week? You have 3 hours of Raw, 2 hours of SmackDown, 2 hours of NXT. Then you have, if you watch Main Event, that's an hour. Then you have 205 Live, that's an hour. I mean, what are we up to? Close to 10 hours a week, over 10 hours a week. And then we have, every 3 weeks we have a pay-per-view. How are you supposed to keep up with that?
Hold on. Just to correct you, 205 Live is only half an hour. So let's cool it a little bit there.
Yeah, well, you get my point, though.
And you also forgot the 1 hour of NXT UK. And yes, I 100% get your point. It's oversaturated. But you're right. I probably can't blame all the part-timers for everything. But I know that the trendy thing these days is to just shit on Vince and blame him. But at the same time, who else can you really blame? You've had guys who could have been megastars, who tried to be megastars, almost got there. Like, the one name that's coming to my mind right now is Dolph Ziggler. The fact that Dolph Ziggler is not like an 8 to 10 time champion, main eventing WrestleManias, things like that, just boggles my mind. He is one of the best workers. He's got great charisma. His gimmick is fantastic. His in-ring is fantastic. But because he got a concussion when he had the world title, it almost seemed like that soured them. And he just never recovered. The guy is consistent all the time, but he never, ever gets the shot. I think that Dolph Ziggler is somebody that the company could have been built around to a degree. He could have been the next Kurt Hennig.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. I do think that there is a fair share of blame to go around. I don't think you can solely put it on Vince's shoulders either. I think that some of the blame goes on the talent as well. I don't think that, not necessarily every talent, some guys just, for whatever reason, never just did get that opportunity, or they did and it was very quickly taken away. But I think that you can't just put it all on Vince either. I think that there's talent that's involved with it as well. I think there's a lot of factors that go into it. I also think that they haven't taken the opportunity to really put the jetpack, so to speak, that's what everybody calls it, the rocket ship or the jetpack, on certain guys. I truly believe that Kevin Owens could be the face of that company if given the opportunity. I've believed that for years, and you and I have discussed that, I believe, on this podcast.
Absolutely. You will not get any argument from me there. Not only Kevin Owens, but I will also say, if we're looking at SmackDown alone, Kevin Owens, Sami Zayn, Baron Corbin. Those are your three that you should be focusing on and making bigger stars.
Yep. And I mean, even somebody like a Cesaro, I don't understand why they haven't gone further. Like, I get that he's not the strongest on the mic. We all know that, but that's very easily solvable with a mouthpiece. Why wouldn't you put him with Heyman? If I'm not mistaken, he was with Heyman for a night or two after WrestleMania 30 when he won the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal. Why wouldn't you keep him with Heyman? Make him the
Or
wrestling
not,
machine. And can you imagine?
not even just Heyman. Like he also had Zeb Coulter with him for a while,
Yeah,
who was another fantastic stick man. But for some reason, none of it ever clicked. But yet,
can you
Jack
imagine?
Swagger,
Yeah.
Jack Swagger is a former world champion for some reason. I'm sorry. I know Jack Swagger's a good wrestler, but I never got behind him. I thought that was the biggest miss in the company of that decade.
Yeah. And can you imagine if you had Cesaro and Heyman together and then eventually start some infighting in that faction? Can you imagine like a SummerSlam or even a WrestleMania main event of Cesaro and Lesnar? Like, can you imagine? That's another thing too. Like, okay, a lot of people are tired of Lesnar. A lot of people don't want to see Lesnar. We haven't seen him for a year. I would be completely fine with him being on this card. I think it would make sense for him to be on this card. And I think that Cena's the same thing. Like, this goes back. I'm just going to bring it back full circle again. I know we're going to get to the rebooking in a second here, folks, but we're kind of hitting on a really interesting discussion, Tyrone and I right now are. And I adamantly, truly believe that if any WrestleMania needs a couple of part-timers, this is the one. It's been so poorly built.
No, and I'm not disagreeing with you that it's been poorly built. I don't necessarily think that part timers need to be there. I mean, I'll give you John Cena. We haven't seen John Cena in a year. The last time we saw him was the Firefly Funhouse match. So I just want to know what the hell's going on with him. Is he trapped in the Funhouse? What's going on? But you briefly just brought up Brock Lesnar and Cesaro. And holy frig, I didn't realize how badly I wanted to see that match until you just said that. Holy hell, that would be incredible.
Yeah. That might be the best match of either guy's career. I mean, they both have the requisite skills. And the thing about Cesaro is that he's incredibly strong, but he can also bump like crazy. Like he has the ability to bump like a cruiserweight in some situations. So I can just imagine how good that match would be. And
the man can also speak like 5 or 6 different languages, so he's kind of perfect for the worldwide image that they want.
Well, I just think that that's the other thing too. Is I mean, we talk about Lesnar, and a lot of people talk about how tired they were of Lesnar and the Paul Heyman shtick. And to be honest with you, I was a little tired of it too. By the time we got to last year's WrestleMania, I was kind of. I mean, I will say I was really looking forward to that McIntyre match. I thought it was going to be just this collision of a match where you're going to have is like two trains smashing into each other. I thought it was going to be hard hitting. I was expecting a good 12 to 15 minute match that was going to be really, really solid. And of course, because of the pandemic, it got cut short. Completely understand that. But why you wouldn't have gone back to that well this year, I don't really know. And I think that there are so many talents on the roster that would be intriguing matches with Lesnar that people don't necessarily think about right away. Like, for perfect example is me suggesting Cesaro. I mean, Cesaro and Lesnar would be off the hook. It would be so good.
But then the only counter I have to that is we had buildups with Lesnar matches that we thought were going to be great. Like there's no reason that Dean Ambrose and Brock Lesnar couldn't have had a great match, but it was a squash. It was Lesnar just beating the living hell out of him, and it sucked. It was a terrible match, and I feel like anytime we get that inclination that Brock's coming back, it's going to be a friggin' great match. It's going to be a barn burner. Then he gets in the ring and it's just suplex, F5, done. Doesn't matter who it is. That's just how he's been built up. That's why when Goldberg beat him, I was not only shocked, but blown away at the fact that he beat him, but beat him in 90 seconds.
Yeah. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that there have been cases where that's happened for sure. I think he's had a lot more good matches than bad. I mean, I think my favorite match of his in the last several years would be that one with AJ Styles at Survivor Series. That was a clinic, that match. That was
a match. I think that was a great one, but if I got to pick his best one over the last little while, it's that triple threat with Cena and Rollins. That was a fantastic match. What was that, the Rumble a couple of years ago?
That was 6 years ago. Yeah, that's what I mean. Like he has a lot more hits than misses, I think. So I do agree with that was just an outstanding match. Absolutely outstanding match. But I just think that you don't necessarily have to have him in the title picture. You could have him just be a mercenary and just come in and just want to wreck people. You could there's an easy enough way to write that story, to tell that story that Lesnar's coming back and he's not quite done. He has a little bit more he wants to do. He wants to show the younger generation who the alpha dog is, even if he's not the champion. I don't know. It's an easy enough story to write. So anyhow, yeah, this is exactly what we were talking about, folks, is that Tyrone and I have very differing opinions about this build to WrestleMania. I'm still going to watch it, obviously. I haven't missed a WrestleMania since I was 13 years old. So I'll be watching both nights live, and I'll be enjoying some snacks and some cold beverages. And listen, if anybody here listening today wants to chime in on this, let us know what you think. Do you agree with Tyrone? Is it time for us to just let this roster go off on their own and see what they can do, sink or swim? Or do we need, for the first big event where fans are back in the stands, do we need to have, a little bit more gravitas? Do we need to have some old faces come back? Do we need a special guest referee and a Steve Austin? Do we need an Undertaker appearance? What do you think? Do we need a Triple H match? Do we need nothing? Let us know on social media.
Just because I said that I don't want to see them in matches, I still think we're seeing them at Mania. Like, I still think we're seeing Steve Austin. I think we're seeing Hulk Hogan. I think it's either going to be them in the ring or a backstage pre-tape or something. I fully believe that they will be involved in one way, shape or form. I could see The Rock being there. There's all these names that they're going to try and pull out, just not for a match, but for an appearance. And for that, I have no problem with it.
Yeah, I can't see the Rock being part of it. Oh, you know what? There's one other thing I wanted to ask you about this. Just before we go on, I know we're going long here, but I'm really interested in this conversation. I know you're enjoying it too. How do you think that it's going to play out in terms of media? So we've had the Super Bowl, and we're going to have some baseball games coming up right before this event takes place. But I'm just wondering, in terms of there is sometimes a very clear media bias towards professional wrestling and sports entertainment, whatever you care to call it. What do you think? Do you think that there's going to be any kind of blip on the radar here in terms of the national news or news services, social media? Is there going to be any kind of like backlash to the WWE running a stadium with 45,000 people, or does it just go kind of fly under the radar, as so often is the case with news and wrestling?
I think it's just it's gonna be a matter of time. I think it all depends on if an outbreak happens because of it. If they can trace something back to it, then yeah, they're gonna get a lot of bad publicity. But if it all goes off without a hitch and everybody's safe and everything is fine, look, man, like I am all about staying home. I have been staying home for a year. It's the thing to do. We have to do it. We have to flatten the curve. I get that. But at the same time, vaccines are starting to roll out. We're going to have to get back to some sense of normalcy. And this is kind of the beginning of it with, like you said, with the Super Bowl, with Major League Baseball doing their thing. Still no fans for hockey or basketball, which I completely get. And I do agree with. I don't think it's a bad thing. Yeah, exactly. I don't think it's a bad thing if you're in an open air stadium to have people there, as long as they're all safe and staying in their, from my understanding, it's going to be pods or something along that line that the people are going to be in. That's fine to me. I don't see it as an issue. I don't think they'll get any bad publicity unless an outbreak happens, and then it'll be the traditional media hopping on wrestling and blaming everything on wrestling.
Yeah, then steroids will come up and Benoit will come up and everything else. I don't necessarily disagree with you. Sorry?
I really hope that they don't bring Benoit up and compare that to COVID, because that's just disgusting.
Well, no,
and I'm not saying you doing that is disgusting. I'm just saying that if the mainstream media does some shit like that, then that's just messed up.
Well, anytime that wrestling is in the headline news, it's never for a good reason. It's never like, hey, WrestleMania was great last night. It's always somebody died, or there's steroid scandal, or this and that. So I can definitely see somehow somebody going back and hearkening back to some negative thing that happened 14 years ago. But
but if we're going to talk about the mainstream media just for a sec here, they are getting some good publicity right now with the whole Bad Bunny situation. Like him being on SNL with the 24/7 title, him winning a Grammy, like they kind of lucked out with him there. I personally was not the biggest fan of Bad Bunny. I'm not gonna lie. Since then, I put on his tunes when I'm at work. They're fun to dance to. They're fun to listen to. I get it. I get why he's such a megastar, and he is somebody that seems to be all in with them right now. And I really respect the fact that he's taken bumps. He's not trying to pussyfoot away from it. He's just having a good time. You can tell he's a fan that is appreciating the business, and he wants to be there, and he will do anything for them. And I think that's fantastic.
No, I don't disagree. I do think that is a good thing for them. I mean, he's a huge global superstar. I don't think quite as well known here in North America as he is, say, in other parts of the world. I think that he is, what I'm trying to say is I think that he's a bigger star in other parts of the world other than North America. And of course, like how North Americans are, that if it doesn't happen here, it really doesn't matter. So I think that he's a big time star, and I think he's a boon to the company for sure. I will say, from my perspective, as far as the attendance goes, that personally, I'm a little skeptical. I think that it's a lot of people. I understand that the Super Bowl just did it, and I understand that we're going to get baseball doing it, and it's all outdoor and all that kind of thing. Maybe it's just the way of my nature. I think it's a gamble, and I'll just be honest with you. If I was in the Florida area, or even if they were doing WrestleMania here in Toronto at like BMO Field or something like that, and I had the vaccine, I was vaccinated, I wouldn't be going. I mean, I think it's too soon for me personally, but I'm not the one making the decision. So I think it's going to be a while for me personally before I'm back in attendance at any form of live entertainment, just based on what's going on in the world.
I completely agree with you. Like, there's no chance in hell you're catching me out in a giant 40,000 person group right now. But at the same time, I'm not going to get mad at somebody if they do. If they choose to do it, they're safe and they're following all the protocols. That's their choice. Would I do it? No. But again, I'm not going to be like, oh, you shouldn't do this, blah, 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 because everybody's different and everywhere is different with their different rules and protocols for everything right now.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess the way I look at it is, like, you and I are the closest to friends. And if we're not willing to sit in an apartment together to watch WrestleMania, I'm definitely not going to go sit in Raymond James Stadium. So, yeah. But anyway, interesting conversations. We'll see how everything plays out. It's always the most interesting time of the year in the wrestling industry, WrestleMania season. There's so much stuff going on. We've gone through this AEW stuff now, and we're about close to an hour in. So I think it's time for us to get into actually what we are booking this week, or rather rebooking. And we'll see where all the chips land in terms of the road to WrestleMania. But speaking of the road to WrestleMania, this particular event this week we're covering is the RoadBlock 2016 WWE Network special from the Ricoh Coliseum in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. It took place on March 12th, 2016. And as we alluded to from the top of the show, Tyrone, you and I were there for this one. And I think about six pints deep by the time we got to the show, if memory serves.
I mean, I don't really remember that. So, yeah, 6 sounds about right. Yeah. I remember you and I in the Uber heading there, and you just being on about there better be pyro. If there's no pyro, this is going to be the dumbest show ever. Why would they do a show without pyro? And I had to look at you and be like, Jay, we're going to the Ricoh. We're not going to the ACC. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Ricoh Coliseum, it is where the Toronto Maple Leafs Farm League team of the AHL, the Toronto Marlies, play. It has a capacity of just under 10,000, so it's still a decent-sized stadium. But this show was originally just supposed to be a live event that they called an audible, and we ended up getting a network special. So I throughout the whole Uber ride, I was like, Jay, we're not getting pyro. Jay, we're not getting pyro. Oh, yes, we are. 100% we're getting pyro. I know we're getting pyro. We're getting Brock Lesnar, so we're getting pyro. And we walk into the damn building, and the first thing you do is look around and go, we're not getting pyro.
Yeah, I actually vaguely remember that. So I think probably 6 pints was about accurate, actually, now that I think of it, based on the fact that I was so on about pyro. There's probably a couple of shots of Jack Daniels or Jameson in there as well. Yeah, no, it was I definitely always enjoy that presentation. Like, just to walk you through a bit of a tradition that I have, and Tyrone's very well acquainted with this, and in fact, I think he enjoys doing it himself, is every time I go to a WWE live event, whether it's a television taping, a pay-per-view, or a house show. And house shows are arguably my favorite form of WWE entertainment to watch, because I feel like you get the best in-ring work is typically either on a pay-per-view or on a house show. Typically not so much on a TV taping. But yeah, I always go in after I get my ticket scanned. I go in and the first thing I do is beeline it through the little curtains, and I go and I just see the empty arena. I want to get a feel for the ring and see what the setup looks like and all that kind of thing. And to your point, exactly that. I walked through the curtain and I was like, damn it. So you can tell by the ring post it wasn't happening.
Yeah, and then you did your usual thing where we find our seats, and then you go, let's go look at the merch. We're going to go look at the merch.
Yeah.
Every show I have been to, probably at least a half dozen shows with Jay, and it's the same thing every single time. We show up to the arena. I usually finish my cigarette. We go inside, see where our seats are, go straight to the merch. Jay hems and haws about which T-shirt he's going to buy, and then he doesn't buy any. And then we end up at the concession stand, grabbing a couple of beers, going to our seats, and then going, we should have got more beers.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I was saying from the top is I'm pretty sure you iced me at this event. Like, out of nowhere, you went to the bathroom, I think, during, I don't remember when it was. It was during one of the matches because you broke your seal, and so did I at that point. And you came back and you just put enough ice in my hand. You're like, I just iced you. And I was like, oh man, that's like 4 years too late. So
yeah, we're grown men. That's what we do. We ice each other all the time.
No, it was funny. I remember your lovely wife, if I'm not mistaken, made you a couple of signs for one of the tag teams that we're going to see at this evening's event. So and you had me hold that up.
She sure did. Yeah, she did, and it made camera. I don't know if you saw that, but it made camera.
I did see it because that's the one I was actually holding. But it was no, they were nice signs. I have to be honest, I was not terribly enthusiastic about holding up a sign for that particular team, but nonetheless, I digress. Just wanted to give you a bit of a...
Here we are 6 years later, though, and it's almost come full circle. Now she's doing all of the artwork for all of our shows.
Absolutely, and she does an incredible job at it. If anybody listening to this didn't know, Tyrone's wife is actually the one that does our artwork weekly, and she does an incredible job. She's just so incredibly talented at what she does. So we are forever thankful for her being on the team with us, and sort of an unsung hero. So any chance I get and you get to kind of tout how incredibly gifted she is, we're going to definitely do it and beat that drum. Couldn't do it without her, and she's just an incredible part of the team for us. So thank you so much.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, I'm a lucky man.
You certainly
are. Yes, give us the rundown of what was going on, Jay. I know that's what you're harping at.
No. Actually, I was going to let you take it this time, but you know what? I'll take it because we were at this event, and then a few weeks later, I was actually at this particular year's WrestleMania 32 down in Dallas. I went down with my brother, and we went down for a week. That, from my understanding, we were there for a week. I don't remember. It was a lot of fun, a great time in the WWE. We had just seen the return of Shane McMahon that we alluded to a couple of weeks ago on the podcast. He had returned out of nowhere to interrupt the Vincent James McMahon Legacy of Excellence Award that was being presented to Stephanie. So we were building up towards an Undertaker and Shane McMahon Hell in the Cell match. We had Triple H going up against Roman Reigns for the WWE title. Triple H had won the championship at the Royal Rumble in the actual Royal Rumble match, which was the first time that had happened since 1992 when Ric Flair won it. We had a really, really good build to this Mania. It was kind of snake bit in the sense that we had a lot of injuries. Cena wasn't wrestling. There was a lot of different people that were typically, mainstays or stalwarts on the WrestleMania card that for one reason or another, they were just dropping like flies this year. So I know a lot of people look back at this Mania and think it's not, their favorite, especially based on the fact that it was the first one at AT&T Stadium, which from a personal perspective was just awe-inspiring. Not the greatest concessions, but awe-inspiring nonetheless. And so I think history's been kind to this Mania. I think at the time it wasn't maybe the greatest on paper Mania that we had seen in a couple of years, but looking back on it, I really think that building towards this Mania, it was actually quite good. What do you think?
I didn't hate the Mania in Dallas at all. I mean, as far as I kind of look at them by decades. So you have the 1 to 9 or 1 to 10, and then the 11 to 20, and then the 21 to 30, 31 plus. It was probably the best one of the 30s. There have been, we kind of alluded to this earlier. Like after a certain year, you said 2011. I say it might even be earlier for me. They all kind of mold together. So I know, for instance, that the Hardy Boys returned at WrestleMania one year in the tag title match. I couldn't tell you what Mania that was.
33.
I know it was there you go. I know it was in the 30s, and I think at one point in the show a couple of weeks ago, I referred to Sting and Triple H at WrestleMania play button because I had no idea what year it was.
Yeah, that's right. It's 31. Yeah.
But I didn't think it was a bad build. I thought like we were going in and getting some pretty cool things. Like you were getting the triple threat women's match for the new women's championship. You had the return of Shane McMahon, like you said. It was interesting. Like they had the whole Triple H Roman Reigns build. I didn't hate it. I just didn't think it was fantastic. But like I said, it was the best of that generation because there have been some real stinkers.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I tend to think that like some of the last few WrestleManias actually weren't that bad. Like I thought that 33 was quite good. I mean, other than the fact that, if I could go back in time, I would have had them wait for The Undertaker and Reigns for the next year, given Taker the year off, and then had that really good, solid match, and that would have been it. I think that that's the way I would have gone with that. But I mean, you had that incredible Goldberg and Lesnar match. That was one of the better WrestleMania championship matches in the last few years. You had the return of the Hardys, as you alluded to. And then, of course, WrestleMania play button. That was a really solid card. So I think that they've been doing pretty good. Like I remember WrestleMania is based on main events typically, or like big marquee matches, and that's kind of what brings me back into the mind space. But I think to your point, like whereas there's other WrestleManias where I can tell you every single match from top to bottom, I can tell you who won, I can tell you roughly how long it is, I can tell you where they took place and this and that. There are a lot of WrestleManias in recent memory that, with the exception of a couple matches, I probably couldn't tell you what the undercard was whatsoever.
See, I'm almost the opposite, where I can tell you a lot of the undercard, but I can't tell you the main events of a lot of them. And I don't know if it's because it's a goddamn 7-hour show now and I fall asleep, or if it's just I don't care about seeing Roman Reigns in the main event that many times. Like this year, I'm fine with it because it's a completely different Roman. But in the past, it was Shield Roman, slightly Shield Roman, less slightly Shield Roman. Like it was just cookie cutter over and over again. It was him and Brock, him and Undertaker, him and Brock. It was just I had enough. So I don't know who main evented what. Like I said, I just know that there was the play button one where Sting and Triple H fought, and I think that was also Undertaker and Bray Wyatt. Yeah. But that's really all I remember about the last few WrestleManias. Like 30 is the last one that I vividly remember the main event, and that's because the Yes Movement and Daniel Bryan.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that too, because we're going to get into the card here in 1 second, but it's fun because you and I talked off camera once. It might have been on this podcast even too, that I remember looking back and seeing that Reigns and Lesnar had fought twice at 31 and 34. And I felt like they main evented every Mania for like 5 years. It was the two of them against each other. I felt like that feud was every year, that match. And you said the same. You're like, yeah, I felt like that match happened like 5 times. And I guess because they had done it at a bunch at like SummerSlams and stuff, but I felt like that was the feud that would never end.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I I hated it. I don't have anything nice to say about that feud, so I'd
Yeah,
rather just not say anything at all.
that's fair. With that being said, I mean, I think we've pretty much covered where we were at Mania for or going into Mania this year. We can just expand upon it. And if we ever do end up doing a rebook of WrestleMania 32, which likely will happen, I will definitely uh, expand upon some of my experiences that week. That was a hell of a week. All I'll say is that Billy Gunn eats a lot of eggs and he's a super nice guy. But with that being said, do you want to run us through this card and we'll just go through and we'll do this rebooking?
Yeah, of course. We had a couple of dark matches, and we don't really need to get into them, but I do remember you and I both popping quite hard to see Mark Henry and Goldust during them. I think Goldust, Mark Henry, and JBL may have been three of our loudest cheers for the entire night. But
Yeah.
our our actual opening contest was for the tag team championship, and we had the League of Nations members Wade Barrett and Sheamus taking on Jay's favorite tag team ever, the New Day.
Now, I just do want to quickly preface the point as well that there was a live event taking place in Atlantic City, New Jersey, the same evening. So, if you're wondering why certain talents were on the card and certain weren't, even with factions, that's the reason why. I have switched around a couple of talents here and there to suit my purposes this evening, but just thought it was important to throw that disclaimer out there. This match is actually staying the same with the outcome being different. I'm going to have the League of Nations go over and win the tag titles here going into Mania. I think it makes a lot of sense to heat up that feud. I didn't think that there's a lot going into this feud. It was kind of a stale faction, like a nothing happening faction with the League of Nations. I really enjoyed their entrance music, I'll say that. But yeah, as a group, they really weren't doing a whole heck of a lot. They were kind of split off into different feuds, and then kind of culminating at the WrestleMania with the 6-man that they end up having. Of course, that was the match where Steve Austin, Mick Foley, and Shawn Michaels came out and ran off the League of Nations. So I felt like that match was all set up just for that spot, which was super cool. But at the same time, if you're gonna do a tag team title match on a network special so close to Mania, and these guys are gonna face each other at Mania, this is one of the rare exceptions where I'm totally like, fine, let's hot shot the titles. Let's put them on the heels. Let's throw some gas on this fire going in.
I don't like this at all. Only because at Mania, it wasn't a tag title match. It was a 6-man tag match. So the logic's already out the window to me because the titles weren't on the line at Mania. So to switch them here doesn't make sense to me. It was a fine match for what it was. All the performers in there are great. You'll never hear me talk shit about Kofi or Wade Barrett or Sheamus or Woods or even Big E. I think they're all fantastic, but I just I thought the League of Nations was one of the absolute worst factions ever. Considering the 4 talented human beings in there, none of them, with the exception of Barrett and Sheamus, ever seemed to gel. Like Del Rio and Rusev together just is comical to me now. But I wouldn't put titles on League of Nations. I think New Day was so hot at this point that it just made sense to keep the titles on them and to was this not the beginning of their run where they held it for over a year and they became the longest running champions?
I think they might have started it in the fall previous. Yeah,
So
no,
so
I
you're just ending that thing there then too. Like that's the other thing is you're ruining their streak. They're no longer going to be the longest reigning tag team champions at this point. They're having to start fresh.
yeah, and I get that, but listen, like I guess I'm kind of contradicting myself because I'm the one that always says that I can't stand hot shotting titles, and I would prefer long title reigns. Whereas I think that the way that they book these days, it's so exceptionally rare that they have long title reigns. It's typically always, hot shotted very quickly. So you make some really good points. I just felt like, yes, it was a 6-man at WrestleMania. I would be okay with doing a freebird rule with it. And having all 3 guys in the ring, or rather, you could switch out or whatever you want to do. But I don't know. I guess it would make sense to hold on to the titles for the New Day. But then again, like, then why even have this match in canon? Why even have these guys face each other if you're just going to go to Mania with it? I don't know. I just kind of felt like
at the same time,
sorry, go ahead.
but at the same time, you could say that about this whole event to a degree. Is why even have this television special this close to Mania? Like, we all knew that we weren't getting any title changes. It's just they just decided to do it.
Well, and that's exactly, I think, my motivation for why I wanted to do it. I kind of just felt like, if you're going to do it, then like, if we're going to do this network special, let's have something happen. I mean, yeah, it was a glorified house show, but at the same time, let's have something happen. Let's have some stakes. Let's show the people watching at home that when you tune into a network special like this, that it's not just another thing to watch on weekly WWE programming. So I felt like, pull an upset here. Have League of Nations go over. You can put the titles back on them at Mania. No problem. But here, at this point, I think, especially being the opening match, sets a pace. And when you have that kind of title change out of nowhere happen, that people then, if they have preconceived notions or expectations about this being just kind of a paint by numbers network special, now they're like, okay, they're changing titles, they're changing directions. Where are they going with this? I kind of think that that's a great way to start an event like this.
I see your logic. I just know that there's another title match down the line on this card that is the one that I would have done a switch on, but we'll get to that when we get to it. Anything else left to say about this match, or should we move on to the next one?
No, I just wanted to say it was a finish with the finish was Sheamus hitting the bro kick with Kofi going off the top rope, so he landed that, and then that was just it. That was the finish. That was, it was relatively clean. So,
all right, I like the finish at least. Up next, we had Chris Jericho going one-on-one with Jack Swagger. Yeah, this one sucked.
Yeah, this did not stay on the card. I have to be honest too. Like, I love Jericho, but this was not my favorite Jericho promo. I thought it was a little long. I did enjoy some of it when he said that, like, Canadians stink. Like, sometimes when you call somebody, like, you say they stink, or you call someone a bum, like, to me that's funny. I don't know why. I remember I was at a baseball game once and somebody kept on yelling, "You're a bum," and it just made me laugh hilariously. But I thought the Jericho promo will stay. It'll be a little bit more condensed, but I'm actually going to switch it up, and I'm going to have Jericho go one-on-one with Sami Zayn, and I think that would be a very good match for this crowd.
I love that so much more than this. I mean, where's the logic in Jericho coming out as a Canadian and shitting all over Canadians and Canada and saying how he's so happy he left the country, only to have the person that's almost defending Canada be the real American Jack Swagger?
Yeah, no, it didn't make a lot of sense. And if I remember correctly, I could be wrong here, but if I remember correctly, it wasn't originally supposed to be Jericho versus Jack Swagger. I think it was supposed to be Jericho versus someone else, but I don't recall exactly who it was. Maybe I'm off base there, but anyhow,
I think you might be right, because no, I think you were right, because I really don't see Chris Jericho and Jack Swagger being the definite match that they wanted to put on a pseudo pay-per-view.
I have the RoadBlock event T-shirt. I actually bought a different T-shirt when we were there, and they gave me that one by mistake. So it's kind of a happy accident, because I really do enjoy having it. I should go look at it, because I'm pretty sure that the Jericho advertised match was different than what would actually happen. I don't think Swagger was on the shirt.
When you find it, take a picture of it, and we'll throw it up on the social so that people can see exactly what the card was supposed to be.
Yeah, that sounds good. We'll do that for sure. I even have the actual chair from the event too, and it was not a network special chair. It was just like a Road to WrestleMania chair. So I'll take a picture of that as well.
How do you have the chair and I don't have any of this? I was sitting right beside you during the event.
Because if you remember correctly, after the show, you were going to go meet your wife for drinks at a bar that wasn't too far from where we were watching the event. And I had to get back home. But when we were walking towards the area to get an Uber, one of the people that was carrying the chair had no interest in it. I'm like, hey, can I buy that chair from you? And he's like, just take it. I don't want it. So he gave it to me. It was great.
Right. I do remember this. Right. Okay. I'll stop interrupting. Break down Sami Zayn and Chris Jericho for me because I like this.
That's okay. I mean, it's really not. It's going to be a super spirited match, as you would imagine. I mean, the two styles would mesh quite nicely. It's going to be a lot of high risk stuff. There's going to be a couple of planches out to the floor and things of that nature. Maybe a tope or two, and then ultimately, I'm just going to have Jericho go over with the walls. I mean, you want to get Jericho over strong going into Mania. He's going to be strong anyway. But I think that the story here is Jericho breaking down a high flyer and then taking him apart piece by piece with, some work on the legs, work on the lower back, not dissimilar from how a lot of submission wrestlers typically perform. And then you're going to have him just have Sami Zayn tap out clean. And that's going to build towards that AJ Styles and Jericho match at Mania. I think it's a great way to tell the story. And it's almost like Jericho is taking Sami Zayn and superimposing Sami Zayn on top of AJ Styles, and this is what he's going to do to AJ Styles at WrestleMania.
No, I love this. I think it's fantastic to make Jericho look strong. It doesn't hurt Sami Zayn at all to take a loss to Chris Jericho at an event like this. I think everything about this is great, and you did a good job on this one, bud.
Well, thanks, man. I appreciate that. Yeah, I just feel like that was the right way to go. Certainly not Swagger. That's really all I have for this one.
Well, then up next, we have the NXT Tag Team Championship being defended, which, if I'm not mistaken, was the first time on a WWE Network special that this happened. I don't think we had seen an NXT Tag Team Championship match yet, but we had the Revival defending against Enzo Amore and Big Cass. And Jay, I just got one question for you, bud. How you doing?
I'm not doing too bad. I finished my caffeine-free Diet Coca-Cola, so I'm a little thirsty. But other than that, I'm doing pretty good. How about you?
Oh, I'm feeling a little SAWFT soft.
Oh boy, yes, you were very much into this match when we were there. Into this act.
I
personally...
okay, so can we just agree that the craziness that these guys were over?
Yes.
Like, I don't know if it was a case of just the gimmick being over, especially Enzo Amore and having the catchphrases that everybody could sing along to, but holy crap, these guys were over. And to see that they are what they are now, it's just sad, man. Like, it was great to see. There was a video clip that surfaced on the internet about a week ago of Big Cass coming back to the wrestling world and getting himself back in shape and looking great. But then Enzo standing beside him, and oh my God, Enzo Amore just looks like the meth head who somehow decided to eat a bunch of cheeseburgers, gain a gut, not shave, not take care of himself, and just go, "How you doing?" It's real sad.
He looked kind of like he was taking... that once a week he would bathe, it would be like in cold, dirty hot dog water or something. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to disparage people. I don't have a ton of high regard for really either one of these guys. I think it's great that Cass has gotten himself back on the right track by all accounts. But I mean, even that stuff that Enzo tried to pull at the Survivor Series a couple of years ago, and I don't know. I don't have a lot of time for them. I wasn't a big fan of these guys then. And you know that I begrudgingly held up that soft SAWFT soft sign when we were at the event. These guys just never resonated with me. It was amazing to me how over they were, but
the one thing that surprises me, like if somebody had told me 6 years ago that 6 years later the only person that would still be in the company and thriving out of the people involved in this match is Carmella, I probably would have laughed at you.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, based on how over they were, but I mean, it's an old story in wrestling, Tyrone, and we've seen it so many times, especially you and I. I've been watching wrestling for 25 years now. I don't know. I think you're maybe a little longer even, or maybe you were around the same.
No, I'm over 30 years now.
Yeah, so I feel like this is an old story. How many times have we seen acts that are super hot? I guess this is where the expression 15 minutes comes from, because they really weren't around that long. I think by the following year they were gone. So I
No,
just
because they got called up to the main roster this year, correct? In
yeah,
2016.
the Raw after Mania 32
And
they
they
were
were
called.
so then they were involved in the tag title match at 33 where the Hardys returned. They were in that ladder match. So they
I'm
stuck around for a bit because then Enzo had his cruiserweight run and Big Cass came back and had his feud with Daniel Bryan, and then they were both cut. So it was probably about 2 to 2.5 years after this.
Yeah, but that's a relatively short run. So that's sort of my point, is that, like, you have some acts that get so hot, and they look like they're going to be the next big thing, and then before you know it, fast forward a year or a year and a half, they're gone. So it's funny, and I mean, a lot of what happened to those two guys, and I hate to say this, I'm not trying to be, disparaging. I don't want to kick somebody that I don't know, but from all accounts of what I've read and what I've seen, what I've heard, and these are all, fairly reputable sources, I think they basically did it to themselves. So I think a lot of what you saw on camera with Enzo, especially, was really what you got backstage as well. But my point is, I mean, for me, as a fan, I can't speak to what happened backstage. I wasn't there. I'm certainly not going to claim that I know what happened backstage. I'm just talking about what I've seen in front of the camera. I was never a big fan of these guys. But with that being said, I've left this match alone. This match was really, really good. Um, I will never take away from both Enzo and Cass's ability to work in the ring. Were they the greatest workers? No, but they had some skills, they had some talent, and in this match with the Revival, this might have been one of the maybe the second best match on the card. I mean, this was a really, really good match. I enjoyed it. I mean, obviously the Revival, they speak for themselves in terms of how great they are. I mean, even JBL alluded to it on commentary. Like, this is Tully and Arn. This is Tully and Arn throwback 2.0. Like, you're not going to get a better team in my eyes than the Revival. So their chemistry with Enzo and Cass was palpable, and I think that this match doesn't need to change.
See, now this is the only one that I would have changed the titles because I could have seen Enzo and Cass getting the titles, and if we're gonna hotshot a tag title, do it with the NXT ones right now. Give it back to the Revival down the road when they're calling up Enzo and Cass. But my God, just for that celebration, especially in we're from Toronto, we're a little biased, but Toronto is a pro wrestling city. They have said it many times. It's up there with the New Yorks, the Bostons, the Phillies, the Chicagos, the Montreals. We are one of those top tier cities. So the crowd would have lost their goddamn minds. And just to see Enzo dancing with the titles, Cass and Carmella celebrating, I think that would have been a great moment. That's the only thing I would have done is I would have put the titles on Enzo and Cass at this point.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I understand where you're coming from. I feel like I'm not going to hotshot the titles on the NXT brand just to call up Enzo and Cass the next night on Raw. Like, I get what you're saying, and I get that it kind of makes sense for them to do the job the night before or 2 nights before at the takeover and then go on and debut. I understand that, but I don't know. I just thought that this match was great, and I was really happy to see the Revival win clean. So I was really okay with this. It sort of, I understand your logic, but it's not kind of the same logic I have going into the New Day and League of Nations match. So uh, sort of the same ideas with both matches, but different philosophies, I think. So no,
Yeah, that's fair. We can agree to disagree on this one. That's totally
yeah,
fair.
yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I'm good with that, and I think we'll move on to the next if you're okay.
Well, next up we have the women's matchup of the night. We have Charlotte and Natty. I I gotta say we've seen this one a lot of times. We've seen it at NXT, we've seen it on pay-per-views, we've seen it on Raw, on SmackDown, everywhere. These two never have a bad match together. I'm not the biggest fan of either woman, only because I think that they've relied on their names and they trust me. Okay, let me rephrase that. they don't rely on their names. When they first started, they relied on their names, and they have since both come into their own and developed their own character. But to me, this matchup itself was almost Natty being like, "Oh, my uncle could beat up your dad." Like, it was just, I hated this one. I hated the build up to it. The match itself was fine, but I hated the build up. Jay, what do you got?
This is another one I'm keeping the same. In that it's going to be Charlotte versus Natalia. Now I'm going to give you your big pop of the night here, and not in the way that you think, because I'm going to have Charlotte.
Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. I think I know what you're doing, and I'm really not looking forward to it.
Well, we're gonna have Charlotte come out with Ric Flair, and then Natalia's going to come out next, and then Natalia's going to introduce her uncle, and Brett's going to come out, and we're going to have Charlotte versus Natalia, but we're going to have Brett and Rick in the corners. Now we're going to see this. We saw this at NXT once. Now, to your point before about these two wrestling quite a bit, at this point in 2016, they hadn't wrestled that much, especially on like Raw or SmackDown. They wrestled a little bit here and there, but it wasn't something that would have been overexposed in terms of a match. And in fact, if you fast forward to the pay-per-view following WrestleMania, I believe it was maybe Backlash. No, it wasn't Backlash. It was maybe Extreme Rules. Anyhow, it was in Chicago, and actually this exact match that I'm talking about did happen. Brett was in Natalia's corner. So I'm just fast forwarding it now to a few about 6 weeks or 2 months earlier. Bret Hart was in the building that night. So I was a little surprised that he didn't make an appearance, but he had just had some surgery for cancer. So I just kind of felt like with everything going on in Bret's life at the time, and especially with the hometown story and Natalia coming back to Canada, I just sort of felt like it would have been a really, really cool moment. I know that you're not the biggest Bret fan, but I think it would have been a really, really cool moment to hear that guitar riff and to have Bret come out and just be there for the live crowd on the road to WrestleMania in Toronto, where he's so over. I think it would have been a really cool moment. And then I'm not going to keep the finish the same. Charlotte's still going to go over. She's going to catch that quick pin, and then we're going to go from there into Mania. But I just thought that adding Bret into the match would have added a huge element of surprise and a lot of fun and sort of a nod to the Canadian fans.
So I don't remember where we were before the show, but I know we were somewhere having a couple of drinks, as our usual meetup thing to do is. And I wore a Bret the Hitman Hart t-shirt to this event, and you just ripped me apart for it. You're like, how can you wear his shirt? You don't even like him, blah, blah, blah. And I simply looked at you and went, hey, Jay, if he shows up, who might get on camera? And he just looked me dead in the eye and asked me if I was fucking serious. I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna rock the Hitman shirt to try and get on camera, and I have no shame to do that whatsoever.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yes, I agree with you. I don't know why Bret wasn't on the show. I thought it would have been a great pop. It's Bret Hart in Canada. Like it's like putting Wayne Gretzky at a hockey game in Canada. It just makes all the sense in the world.
Yeah, and I think
I can't.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think probably it just had to do with the fact that maybe he had just recently had the operation and maybe he just wasn't up to it. I mean, it's a lot to be in front of people like that. And even if you're not really performing necessarily in the ring, you still have to perform a character to somewhat of a degree when you're out there at ringside and you have to interact with Flair and all that kind of thing. So I think that maybe it just was a little too soon for him. I do remember that at the pay-per-view I was alluding to, where they had this match, that Bret and Natalia put tandem sharpshooters on Rick and Charlotte. So maybe Bret just didn't want to be there and do a whole lot because he wasn't quite feeling physically up to it. So they saved it. I'm just saying that, all things being equal, I wouldn't have cared if Bret just came out to the entranceway and waved to the crowd and went back through the curtain. Just to see him would have been really cool. And especially Tyrone, I don't know if you've ever been to a live event where Bret Hart has been, whether it was during his prime or afterwards, but every time he comes, you hear that guitar riff in Toronto. The roof blows off whatever building you're in. So that's a cool moment.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I actually have never been to an event where Bret Hart was at, and I'm probably gonna keep it that way.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, we're gonna move on. We're gonna move
though.
on from this. Yes, I do own a shirt. I still have the shirt. I also have a couple of Hart Foundation shirts. Yes, yes. Some of them came in pro wrestling crates. Couldn't help that.
One of them was a gift.
One of them was a gift from you as well.
Yes.
All right. Are we done? We're good with this one? We're keeping it
Yeah,
the same?
as I said, the finish is going to stay the same. I like the finish. I like the quick pin with the ropes there and stuff. I thought it was good. So.
All right. Well, up next, we have a 2-on-1 handicap match in which Brock Lesnar is just going to destroy the Wyatt family, Bray Wyatt and Luke Harper. But let's be real, Jay. This was pretty much a 1-on-1 match with Luke Harper and Brock Lesnar. Because if I'm not mistaken, I think Bray was injured, correct?
Bray was injured, and he didn't do anything, and that's part of the reason why he didn't do anything at Mania either. If you remember at Mania this year, he had that verbal smackdown with The Rock, and then of course The Rock, I believe he beat Rowan in like 5 seconds or something. He tore off all of his workout gear, and he had his ring tights and everything on underneath in the boots. But he didn't work for a while. So I'm not sure where you're going to land on this. I have a feeling you're not going to like this, but I've actually taken the Wyatts completely out of this event. I just didn't see a point. If you're going to, they had built up this feud since the Royal Rumble. They had eliminated Brock. So I felt as though this was not the time to blow this off, because if I'm not mistaken, they never touched again after this. So don't blow it off here. If you can't have Wyatt in the match.
Yeah, no, and before you get into who you rebooked this, I agree with you so hard. I thought that this was so bad. They clearly were trying to go the Brock Lesnar Bray Wyatt route at Mania, it seemed, by having the entire Wyatt family eliminate him, drag him. I think they dragged him away too. Like, it was just one of those weird situations where Brock was vulnerable.
Yeah.
And then it went nowhere. This was the only thing that came out of it.
Yeah, they pivoted to Dean Ambrose with Lesnar. They had a match at the Fastlane pay-per-view a few weeks earlier. It was a triple threat with Dean Ambrose, Roman Reigns, and Brock Lesnar, and then Roman went over on Dean, if I'm not mistaken, and then Lesnar and Ambrose. Ambrose had challenged Lesnar the following night on Raw to WrestleMania, and Paul Heyman accepted, and then they kind of built to it. I think they just pivoted real quick away from Bray. That would have been a really cool match. Bray versus that particular version of Bray Wyatt versus Brock Lesnar, I think would have been a really intriguing match. So it's unfortunate it didn't happen. And I understand why they pivoted to Ambrose. That makes sense. But for the purposes of this event, I just didn't feel like if you're not cleared to go. I mean, it's a different story if you have a concussion and you don't know when you're going to be able to come back. It could be 6 months, or if you're going to be out for a year, I get that. But if you're going to be wrestling again in a month or 6 weeks, why not just hold off on it? You can keep on stoking the flames on television. You could maybe have them swerve Lesnar at Mania, and then build the feud that way. But to blow it off here, with no offense to Luke Harper, he's an amazing worker, but that is a very anticlimactic way to blow off this feud. So long story short, I've just taken the Wyatts off the card. I put them in Atlantic City. They're with the rest of the guys. They're with Rowan and Strowman. And I'm going to substitute the Wyatts with Dolph Ziggler. So I'm going to do Dolph Ziggler versus Brock Lesnar here. And I feel like that would be a really fun match. And obviously Lesnar is going to just throw Dolph Ziggler around like a rag doll. And of course, Ziggler has the ability to move around like crazy and bump like crazy. And of course, also his offense, he'd be able to get some quick offense in there as well. And I think it would be a fun match. Lesnar loves working with smaller guys. So I think that would be a solid match.
Yeah, I don't hate it. I mean, I get the reasoning of taking the Wyatts off. That makes all the sense in the world. And if you're looking for somebody to just bump hard for Brock, I mean, I said it earlier today. Dolph Ziggler's your guy. He
Yep.
he's the go-to. He's the workhorse. He's the one that you throw in there with the Bill Goldberg. And funnily enough, in Toronto, when you need to make him look good. I
Yep.
don't hate this. I'm okay with this. I'm fine with it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think the thing is, like, some people might be wondering, like, okay, well, why did you even keep Brock on the card then? Like, there's no purpose to this match. And I kind of feel as though the purpose for putting this match on the card is you're going to keep people's ideas of Brock fresh in their minds. You're going to see Brock throw somebody around that's relatively close to the same size as Ambrose. Obviously, the styles are a bit different, but it's kind of an expose. This event to me, in a lot of ways, kind of resembled the first Royal Rumble in that you had an event that was going on. You had another event going on not too far away, maybe an hour's flight away from here. It's the same thing with the first Royal Rumble. You had 2 or 3 events going on simultaneously. So you didn't have all the stars on the card. And I kind of felt like this was be a good way to keep the mystique of Lesnar alive going into WrestleMania. Not that it was in danger of not, being there, but I felt like it was a good expose of Lesnar to see him go over a really talented superstar in fairly short order and then move on to WrestleMania with that win under his belt. I thought was kind of fun.
Yeah, and I don't think that people are questioning why keep Lesnar on the card. Like, it was one of his dates. The man had limited dates, and this was one of them. That's the reasoning right there. I mean, for God's sakes, he worked how many dates where it was just him standing in the ring, bouncing up and down while Heyman talked, and he didn't even get physical. So
Yeah,
I have no issue with this whatsoever. Let's put a bow on that match and move on to the next one, shall we?
absolutely.
All right. Well, up next, we know it doesn't exist anymore because we had Sami Zayn defeating Stardust in boy, oh boy, a barn burner. So I'm curious to see what we have to replace this.
Well, actually, what I've done here is I'm going to call back to an old feud that we had seen the year previous, and I'm going to light this fire up back again, just for the purposes of this event, and to have not really a let me up match, but a really, really solid in ring back and forth. And we would see this match a few years later at a very important pay-per-view in wrestling history back in 2019. So we are going to see Stardust go up against his older brother Goldust in a pretty solid outing here, a really spirited match. And we had seen this feud happen previously at about a year removed. We had this feud blow up right before WrestleMania play button. So I thought that this would be a perfect little callback to a feud. And of course, you're never going to have a bad match between the Rhodes brothers.
You put Goldust on the goddamn card, Jay. I can't be mad at this at all. I love the fact that you have him going up against Stardust. I like that we're getting Rhodes versus Rhodes. So here's my issue though, is when Goldust and Stardust broke up as a tag team, why did we still get the Stardust gimmick? Why did we not go back into the Cody Rhodes? That was the only thing that really baffled me out of that whole situation.
Yeah, no, you're right. And I mean, I think that's part of the reason why Cody left. I mean, he left in May of 2016. I had to read that a couple of times. I couldn't believe it's been 5 years since Cody left the WWE. But yeah, it has been. He left in the May, like 2 months after this, he was gone. So I think that was part of the reason why he left, was they weren't interested in having him do something else. He didn't want to do Stardust anymore. I think a lot of people looked at the Stardust gimmick as sort of a rehashing or a modernization of the Goldust gimmick, and obviously portrayed differently. But I mean, I enjoyed it for a period of time. I'll be honest. I liked it. It was around for, I think, better part of 2.5 years. I liked it for the first little bit, and I actually kind of thought it was fun to have the two of them as these characters as a tag team. But once you broke them up, exactly to your point, it was time for something fresh for Cody. I didn't need to see Stardust on his own as a heel, completely removed from Goldust. Goldust being nowhere in the main picture other than being, on a main event taping, or every now and again he'd be on a Raw, typically more than likely than not on a house show. So yeah, I don't understand why Stardust remained and Cody was no more. It was bizarre.
I feel like they were almost trying to, like, kind of what you just alluded to. They were trying to make Cody the second coming of Goldust, and not necessarily writing Dustin out, but he was getting older, which is weird to say back in 2016 because here we are in 2021 and he's still going and looking damn good as he does.
Yeah.
But it was almost like they were trying to get rid of the Goldust character and have Stardust take over for it. But I'm sorry, Goldust is, for lack of a pun, gold. It's one of the best gimmicks ever. You can't just throw something similar on somebody else, whether or not they're related or not, and be like, oh, it's going to stick. Because Cody did everything he could with Stardust. But what you just said, we enjoyed it at first. But by this point, I was really over it. Like, I think at this point, he was teaming with the Ascension. And that, if there's ever a kiss of death, that's it right there.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing, too, is the first thing that popped in my mind when you were just talking about that is, the thing is, you can't rehash Goldust either, because the history of the character was created and evolved at a time where you're able to do things that you couldn't possibly do in 2016 on WWE PG television. That was the genesis of the character, was the risque, androgynous type character that they were pushing the envelope with in 96, 97, 98, 99, and beyond. So to establish Goldust as a character, you have that history behind it. Whereas almost 20 years of it, really. So whereas actually over 20 years at this point. So whereas you have Cody, who's kind of like adopting this, it's almost like Robin turning into Batman. Like, you adopt this character, you take this character on, but you don't have the history or the lineage behind it to really establish it as anything more than to your point, like a not a cheap knockoff, but you're never going to be able to have that kind of same rich textural history that you did with the Goldust character. So I thought it worked when the two of them were together as a team, but separately, it didn't work at all for me.
Yeah, it's one thing to have a character like Doink the Clown where you can have multiple people put on the clown makeup and be him, and it's fine. You can't have multiple people put on the gold face paint and be Goldust. It's just not a thing. We weren't able to have a second one. Like, can you picture the storyline of Goldust and Ahmed Johnson going on in 2016 with Stardust and Kofi Kingston?
That's exactly my point. Is that
exactly. Or like, what was the other big one he did with the fake tattoo of Razor on his heart? Like, that shit just wouldn't fly.
Well, the Hollywood Backlot Brawl at WrestleMania 12. You think you'd be able to see Goldust getting, bumping around the ring in a negligee? I mean, Stardust doing that at WrestleMania 32, bumping around the ring in a negligee? Like, it's not happening.
I mean, you definitely wouldn't be getting the O.J. Simpson references or anything like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And had that been the Attitude Era, in 2016, who knows where they would have been going with that. I don't even want to speculate. I was just about to say it, but I'm not even touching that. So
yeah, let's not touch that one, because it's not going to be a good thing. But what do we have going over? How's it ended?
Well, I mean, for me, it's going to be a really, really solid match. It's obviously not going to be the kind of quality of match that we would get at the AEW pay-per-view. I mean, they just weren't going to be given the time. I am going to have Stardust go over here only because I feel like, he is the younger guy. It makes sense for Goldust to put him over. But at the same time, this was just a kind of throwaway match. Neither guy was going to be doing a whole lot after this. And again, it wouldn't be too far after this that Cody would be gone. But you have to remember that Cody was, he did do some more interesting matches still after this. So he hadn't requested his release at this point. So I don't think that they were quite at the point where they were just giving up on him or jobbing him out. So I think it made sense to put Stardust over here. But no, it was a solid match, but nothing 5-star or anything like that.
Yeah, it bums me out that we didn't get that match at Mania Play Button. I think that could have, if given enough time, potentially stolen the show, especially if you had Dusty involved in it. I might be off here. Dusty might have already passed by that point, but I don't really remember. But if you could have had him involved at a Mania match the year prior with the two of them, that would have been such an amazing story. And it never happened. And I'm really, really sad it didn't. We did get it, as you said, at AEW a few years later, but to me, it just wasn't the same.
Well,
No,
sorry.
go ahead. No, go ahead.
There was a really cool angle that happened a couple of years, about 3 years previous to this, where they had fired Cody, and then they had fired Dusty, and then Dustin came back and tried to fight for their jobs and all this and that, and against Randy Orton, and then finally at a pay-per-view in, I think it was the fall of 2013, they had this final match where it was the Shield versus Cody and Goldust with Dusty in the corner, and that was an incredible moment to see the three Rhodes family members together, to see the brothers and then the father, of course, as well, and Dusty doing the bionic elbow and all that kind of thing.
If I'm not mistaken, that actually took place at Battleground in Buffalo, and it was the only match on the card worth watching. And I'm pretty sure that the Goldust return against Randy Orton, was that not in Toronto at Raw as well?
I was at that Raw in Toronto when they did the Goldust return, and it was a long match. It was like a 3-seg match.
There we go. Like they could all work, but yet we still just threw them in it. Like, don't get me wrong, that Shield match with the Rhodes brothers was fantastic, and if you guys have not seen that, I highly recommend it.
Yeah,
as I said, I'm 90% sure it was at Battleground in Buffalo, New York, and totally worth the watch.
And an emotionally charged match. Like, you knew it was all an angle and you knew it was all being built up, but there was some real raw emotion there, and you got fired up. I mean, that was one of those angles that the WWE did really well. They built it really, really well. And see, there you go. Like, this is what happens when you build a storyline. You give it some time. You build stakes. You put some story behind something. People give a shit. When you just put matches on a card just for the sake of, oh, this will be a great match, we'll fill in the blanks later, no one cares. So an amazing little piece of history here with these two guys going back and forth at this pay-per-view, the way I've rebooked it. I just think that there's so much rich history, them being brothers fight, brothers argue. They've been allies, they've been adversaries. So I think it was a fitting match to put on this card.
Yeah, I'm all about it. But that leads us now to our main event of the evening, which is Triple H defending the WWE World Heavyweight Championship against the Lunatic Fringe Dean Ambrose.
Yes, indeed, my friend. And this is another one that I am going to steer clear from. I absolutely love this match. I love the match when we saw it live. I know, I don't want to speak for you, but I'm fairly certain, based on our conversations, you're not the biggest Triple H fan. I thought he looked fantastic here. He looked like a champion, a heel champion. He was going in to WrestleMania looking like the consummate heel champion. There's something I find that at this point with Triple H, especially here with the championship, he kind of, in a way, was like wrestling royalty, or maybe that was kind of the way that the character was being presented because of his, association being part of the McMahon family. He sort of like he had this presence of like wrestling royalty to him. And I really so enjoyed this match. This is the kind of wrestling that I absolutely love. You tell a story. The match was fairly long. I love that they worked body parts. I love that they were telling the story in the match of Dean working on the leg with the quad. The commentators were doing an excellent job in this match, telling that story for the performers. I just think that this match was outstanding, and I really, really enjoyed it going back and watching it this week. So I wouldn't have touched it. What do you think, man?
I mean, the match itself was fine. The only thing I really liked about it was, I think you and I were under the same impression that we knew we weren't getting a title change. They had spent so long building up Triple H and Roman Reigns, especially after the Rumble, things like that. But they actually sucked us in a few times with the false finishes that we were like, holy shit, could we actually see a title change right now?
Yeah.
And that doesn't happen very often. Could it have been the few pops that we had beforehand? Maybe. But again, rewatching this the other day, I was still almost sucked right back into it. Like, it was a good match. It was a damn good match by Triple H standards and a good match by most standards. Now, what you were saying about Hunter looking like wrestling royalty or kind of being treated like that, could that also be because he was the King of Kings?
Perhaps,
But
yes. Yes, very. That's touche. No, to your point about the false finish, I did kind of forget about the false finish until I rewatched the match just last night, actually, and I don't think we were the only ones. Excuse me, because I was watching the crowd reactions right behind where the false finish took place. It was facing the east side of the ring, and it was incredible because you could see people like clearly, well-educated marks of wrestling smarks. They were all like flabbergasted. Everybody was just blown away. Like there was one guy I noticed, he had like a New Day hat on and he had some kind of merch shirt on, and he was like, why is it not a title change? Like you could see people like just, and that to me is when wrestling is at its absolute best. When every single person that I could see within eyeshot of this event on the feed from the network, everybody had suspended their disbelief. Everybody was on their feet when that false finish happened. Everybody was blown away by it. And when you have the crowd in the palm of your hand like that, you've built up through the course of a match such a psychological masterpiece that you're able to manipulate the crowd into believing that. I think it's a testament to both guys. And I really think that the match itself it's a very underrated match. In fact, I think I might say that I enjoy that match a little bit more than I enjoy the actual WrestleMania match with Roman Reigns.
Oh, I agree 100% on that one. 100%. I think that Dean Ambrose was able to give you so many more facial expressions and storytelling moments than Roman Reigns ever could. If we're talking Roman Reigns and John Moxley, like they are completely different performers where Roman doesn't have the facial expressions. He has the oh my god, what? Like or the stern I'm going to get you, whereas Ambrose is just all over the board. He can tell so many stories with his facial expressions, with his body language, everything, where Roman's not able to do that. I don't I don't disagree with the fact that Roman Reigns should be the face of the company right now because he should, but he's a very different performer. And I think that Ambrose and Triple H, had they been on top at Mania, it would have been a whole different Mania.
Yeah, see, I understand. Like, I think that it should have been Reigns versus Triple H at Mania. I understand that completely. It wouldn't have made a lot of sense to me to have suddenly have Ambrose in that spot. But for me, I understand what you're saying. Like at this time, if we're talking about 2016, yes, it makes total sense to me that what you're saying in terms of the way that Ambrose is able to convey his emotion through facial expression and body language and things of that nature. But you have to remember as well that Reigns at this time was being pushed in a certain way. Had we had Reigns of 2019, or sorry, not 2019, but 2020 or 2021, things maybe would have been a little different. I think that Reigns as a heel is a natural heel, and he's quite good at his role. But at this particular time, I think that a lot of people at this point, even in 2016, if memory serves me correctly, I think a lot of people are already at this time a little bit tired of the Roman Reigns show, because I think that people can tell when it's not necessarily authentic. And I don't think that the way that Reigns was portrayed for the better part of his main event run until his heel turn was authentic to him as a personality. Not saying that he's a bad person in real life, or, I'm just saying that when you are playing someone that is not necessarily grounded in who you are as a person in real life, I think that people can detect that, and they can see through it. And I think that's a big part of the reason why Reigns never reached the heights that they wanted him to until, well, probably now when he turned heel. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Oh, 100%. I absolutely could not agree with that more. I think that he was also being shoved down everyone's throats to the point that we were like, all right, we're done. No matter how much you want us to like this guy, we're gonna boo him. It's the John Cena effect. That's just what happens.
Yeah, no, but yeah, exactly. And I think that with him being a heel now, it's a different kind of heat, different kind of exposure. I just don't think that he was. I mean, we've heard about this so many times that people have said that, like Joe backstage is quite a bit different than how he's portrayed on television. He's a much different guy. He's funny. He's sarcastic. He's got a great sense of humor. All this kind of stuff. But the way that he was portrayed on television for the better part of the last 5 years as a face was obviously the antithesis of how he was backstage. So when you're one way as a person and then you're portraying something that's different than acting. I mean, it's acting, but it's also theatrical performance art mixed with sport. It's a different ball of wax. Like when you're an actor, you have time to prepare and you learn the character. Whereas with Reigns, it's a different type of performance. And I just don't think that he was 100% comfortable with how he was supposed to be portraying himself. Whereas now he seems like he's 110% in. And they always say it's a lot more fun playing a heel. So
I think it'll be interesting to see when he comes out at Mania and there's people in the crowd if he gets cheered or if he gets booed.
I think he's going to be cheered.
I think that he's 100% going to be the face in that situation, and Edge is going to be the heel.
I don't know. It's hard to say. It really depends on who arrives. I mean, you have to remember that a lot of people that are going to be at that stadium aren't the typical fans that go to Mania. I mean, people are coming from Europe. It's going to be a lot of local people or people from the surrounding area. I don't imagine there's going to be a ton of air travel into Tampa for this. So if it's traditional, like casual-esque type fans that follow programming and kind of are following storylines and are kind of cheering and booing based on who the company pushes you to, then it might be a very interesting reaction. Actually, the opposite than what we are typically used to at Mania, where you get the very vocal, hardcore marks. We might not get that this year.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I didn't think of that. All right. Well, do you want to give us a rundown of your card and what you did to change it, or not even change much, if you will?
Absolutely, sir. We did the tag team title match. We did the New Day taking on the League of Nations, with the League of Nations actually going over and winning the tag team championships going on into WrestleMania. We had Chris Jericho taking on Sami Zayn, and Jericho would tap Zayn with the Walls of Jericho. We had the Revival retain the NXT tag team titles over Enzo and Cass, accompanied by the lovely and talented Carmella. We had the WWE Divas Championship. This was not too long before they would change that to the Women's Championship. Charlotte defending the title with Ric Flair in her corner, taking on Natalya with Bret Hart in her corner, and Charlotte would come up on the winning end of that. Brock Lesnar would be taking on Dolph Ziggler in a fairly spirited squash-esque type match. We have Goldust going up against Stardust, with Stardust getting the win there. And then we are not touching the main event, with Triple H going up against Dean Ambrose, and Triple H retaining in a very, very solid outing.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Jay's rebook of Roadblock 2016. I feel like this episode of the rebooking took almost as long as the actual show itself. Now, with that being said, Jay, what do you got on tap for me next week? What are we doing?
Well, Tyrone, I think it's time. I think it's time that we leave our homes, we hop into a car, and I think it's time we go over and we drive up onto the on-ramp there, and we hit ourselves onto the road to WrestleMania. And I think we are going to start our journey to WrestleMania by continuing on where I left off with the Royal Rumble 1991. Tyrone, my friend, you are picking up the mantle and rebooking WrestleMania 7.
Well, this will be fun. Jesus.
Hey, I left you with a lot to work with. I didn't have Kurt Hennig win the Royal Rumble in 2002. So.
No, but you had Earthquake win the goddamn title. So yes, you left me with some things, but also I guess I have carte blanche with this, and I could just be like, oh well, there's a Saturday night's main event in between, and this happened. So this should be interesting.
It should be interesting. I'm going to be very interested to see because, folks, this is an experiment for us. We decided kind of on the fly here a few months back. We discussed it right before an episode, and we sort of said, hey, what if one of us books the Rumble and the other one books the Mania based on the rebooking? So for those of you that haven't listened to the Royal Rumble 1991 episode, I highly recommend that you go back into the archives and check it out because it's going to give you a really clear indication of where the Fed lies in 91 in terms of our universe going into WrestleMania 7. So it's going to be really cool to see what you come up with and how you keep things, change things, move the pieces around the chessboard, for the lack of a better term. So I'm looking forward to it, pal.
Yeah, it should be a good one. But I think that as we approach the 2 hour mark on this show, it's time to put a bow on it and wrap it on up.
Absolutely. Let's do it. So, Tyrone, do you want to just tell everybody quickly how they can reach us on social?
Yeah, of course. On Twitter, we are good_enemies. On Instagram, good_enemies. And on Facebook, just the Good Friends Better Enemies podcast. And do not forget, Count It Out 7 YouTube channel. That's where you found us. That's where we always are. Make sure you like, subscribe. They've always got new content up there. Not just us, but also their own shows, their own interviews. Everything on that channel is superb.
Without question. And so we'll look forward to next week's rebooking of the WrestleMania 7 event. And for Roadblock, Tyrone, Smirnoff Ice, Bret the Hitman Hart, Gold Dust, Mark Henry, and JBL Pops. My name is Jay. That you listen to Tyrone, and we are the Good Friends, Better Enemies podcast.
Bye.